Working with people you don't like is one of the most common challenges in any workplace. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, how organized you try to be, or how much effort you put into staying professional. Eventually, you will encounter someone whose personality clashes with yours. It might be a coworker who talks too much, someone who constantly interrupts, a colleague who refuses to take responsibility, or a person who always seems to bring tension into the room. These situations can drain your energy, disrupt your focus, and make even simple tasks feel heavier than they should. This book is designed to help you navigate those moments with clarity and confidence. Instead of reacting emotionally or avoiding the problem, you will learn how to understand the dynamics behind difficult interactions and how to respond in a way that protects your well-being. The goal is not to change other people. The goal is to strengthen your ability to work effectively, even when the environment is challenging. When you understand what triggers you, how to manage your reactions, and how to communicate with intention, you gain control over situations that once felt overwhelming. Throughout these chapters, you will explore the patterns that create friction between people, the habits that make conflict worse, and the strategies that help you stay grounded. You will learn how to set boundaries, how to maintain your composure, and how to work with different personalities without losing your sense of balance. These skills are not just useful for difficult coworkers. They are essential for any professional who wants to grow, lead, and build resilience in a fast-paced environment. This book will not promise that every relationship will become easy. Instead, it will give you the tools to stay steady, focused, and capable, even when the people around you are not. By the end, you will understand how to work with anyone, not because they changed, but because you learned how to navigate the situation with clarity and strength. Chapter 1: Understanding Why People Clash at Work. Conflict in the workplace rarely begins with dramatic events. Most of the time, it starts quietly, with small misunderstandings, subtle differences in behavior, or assumptions that go unspoken. These small moments accumulate until they shape how you see another person and how they see you. When you understand the roots of these clashes, you gain the ability to navigate them with clarity instead of frustration. This chapter focuses on the underlying reasons why people struggle to work together, even when they share the same goals. Every person enters the workplace with a unique combination of personality traits, habits, values, and expectations. Some people prefer structure, while others thrive in flexibility. Some communicate directly, while others soften their words to avoid tension. Some work quickly and make decisions on instinct, while others take their time and analyze every detail. These differences are not inherently good or bad, but they create friction when they collide. When someone's natural style contradicts your own, it can feel like they are being difficult, even if they are simply being themselves. Another source of conflict is the way people interpret behavior. You do not react to what someone does. You react to what you believe their behavior means. If you value calm communication, a coworker who speaks loudly may feel aggressive. If you prefer planning, someone who improvises may seem careless. If you like clear instructions, someone who communicates loosely may appear disorganized. These interpretations happen quickly and often without conscious thought. They shape your emotional response long before you have time to analyze the situation. When you become aware of your own filters, you can separate the behavior from the meaning you attach to it. Workplace pressure also plays a significant role in creating conflict. Deadlines, shifting priorities, unclear expectations, and limited resources can make even small interactions feel heavier than they should. When people feel overwhelmed, they become less patient, less flexible, and less aware of how their behavior affects others. Stress narrows attention and reduces empathy. A coworker who seems dismissive may simply be trying to manage their own workload. Someone who appears short-tempered may be dealing with pressure you cannot see. Understanding the impact of stress does not excuse poor behavior, but it helps you respond with clarity instead of reacting impulsively. Another factor that contributes to workplace clashes is the difference in personal boundaries. Some people are comfortable with frequent interruptions, while others need long periods of uninterrupted focus. Some enjoy social conversations during work, while others prefer to stay task-oriented. Some are open about their thoughts, while others keep their opinions private. When boundaries are mismatched, tension builds. A person who values privacy may feel overwhelmed by someone who shares too much. A person who enjoys collaboration may feel ignored by someone who prefers independence. Recognizing these differences allows you to adjust your approach without compromising your own needs. Clashes also arise from differences in expectations. People often assume that others understand what they want, how they work, and what they consider respectful. When these expectations are not communicated, misunderstandings occur. A coworker may think they are being helpful by offering suggestions, while you interpret it as criticism. Someone may believe they are being efficient by sending brief messages, while you interpret it as cold or dismissive. These mismatched expectations create tension that grows over time. Clear communication reduces this friction, but many people avoid these conversations because they fear conflict. Ironically, avoiding the conversation often creates more conflict in the long run. Another reason people clash is the presence of unspoken roles within a team. In every workplace, people naturally fall into patterns: the organizer, the problem solver, the skeptic, the motivator, the quiet observer. These roles are not assigned, but they influence how people interact. When two people try to occupy the same role, competition emerges. When a role is left unfilled, someone may feel forced into it. When someone's role is misunderstood, their behavior may be misinterpreted. Understanding these dynamics helps you see the bigger picture instead of focusing only on individual actions. Past experiences also shape how people respond to conflict. Someone who has worked in a hostile environment may be quick to defend themselves. Someone who has been ignored in previous jobs may speak more forcefully to ensure they are heard. Someone who has dealt with unreliable coworkers may double-check everything, which can appear controlling. These reactions are often rooted in history rather than the present moment. When you recognize that people carry their past into their current behavior, you can approach interactions with more patience and less judgment. Cultural differences add another layer to workplace dynamics. People from different backgrounds may have different norms around communication, hierarchy, time management, and emotional expression. What feels respectful in one culture may feel distant in another. What feels efficient to one person may feel rushed to someone else. These differences can create confusion if they are not acknowledged. Understanding cultural diversity does not require you to become an expert in every background, but it does require openness and curiosity. Finally, people clash because they are human. Everyone has moments of frustration, insecurity, distraction, or fatigue. Everyone has days when they are not at their best. When you expect perfection from others, you set yourself up for disappointment. When you recognize that people are imperfect, you create space for understanding. This does not mean tolerating harmful behavior. It means approaching interactions with a balanced perspective, acknowledging that conflict is a natural part of working with others. Understanding why people clash at work does not eliminate the challenge, but it gives you a foundation for navigating it. When you can identify the patterns behind difficult interactions, you gain the ability to respond with intention instead of frustration. You begin to see conflict as information rather than a threat. This shift in perspective allows you to stay grounded, maintain your professionalism, and approach each situation with a clearer sense of what is actually happening. The goal is not to avoid conflict entirely, but to understand it well enough that it no longer controls your reactions. Chapter 2: Identifying your triggers and blind spots. Working with people you don't like becomes significantly easier when you understand what actually bothers you. Most people assume the problem is the other person's behavior, but the real source of tension often lies in how that behavior interacts with your internal triggers. A trigger is not just something that annoys you. It is a specific action, tone, or pattern that activates an emotional response before you have time to think. When you identify these triggers, You gain the ability to respond with clarity instead of reacting impulsively. This chapter focuses on recognizing the internal patterns that shape your reactions and the blind spots that make certain interactions feel more intense than they should. Triggers usually form from past experiences. If you have worked with someone who constantly interrupted you, you may become sensitive to anyone who cuts you off, even if their intention is harmless. If you have dealt with a coworker who dismissed your ideas, you may react strongly to even mild disagreement. These reactions are not irrational. They are learned responses designed to protect you from repeating negative experiences. The challenge is that these responses can activate in situations that do not actually pose a threat. When you understand where your triggers come from, you can separate the present moment from the past. Another common trigger is a mismatch in values. If you value punctuality, someone who is consistently late may frustrate you more than they frustrate others. If you value clarity, someone who communicates vaguely may feel difficult to work with. If you value respect, someone who speaks bluntly may feel abrasive. These values shape your expectations, and when those expectations are not met, tension builds. Recognizing which values matter most to you helps you understand why certain behaviors feel more personal than they actually are. Blind spots also play a significant role in workplace conflict. A blind spot is a behavior or habit you do not notice in yourself but others see clearly. For example, you may believe you are being direct when others experience you as abrupt. You may think you are being helpful when others feel you are taking over. You may believe you are being calm when others interpret your silence as disapproval. These blind spots create misunderstandings that escalate conflict. When you become aware of them, you can adjust your behavior in ways that reduce tension without compromising who you are. One way to identify your triggers is to pay attention to your physical reactions. Your body often responds before your mind does. You may feel your shoulders tense, your breathing change, or your patience shorten. These signals indicate that something in the interaction is activating an emotional response. Instead of ignoring these signals, observe them. Ask yourself what specifically caused the reaction. Was it the person's tone? Their timing? Their choice of words? Their facial expression? The more specific you become, the easier it is to understand the root of the trigger. Another method is to reflect on patterns. Think about the people who consistently frustrate you. What do they have in common? Do they interrupt? Do they talk too much? Do they avoid responsibility? Do they challenge your ideas? Do they move too slowly or too quickly? These patterns reveal the behaviors that activate your triggers. Once you identify the pattern, you can prepare for it instead of being caught off guard. Preparation reduces emotional intensity and increases your ability to respond thoughtfully. Blind spots require a different approach. Because they are difficult to see on your own, you may need feedback from people you trust. This does not mean asking coworkers to critique you. Instead, reflect on past interactions where someone reacted strongly to something you said or did. Ask yourself what part of your behavior may have contributed to the reaction. You are not looking for blame. You are looking for insight. When you understand how others experience you, you gain the ability to adjust your approach in ways that reduce unnecessary friction. Another way to uncover blind spots is to observe how you respond to feedback. If you become defensive when someone offers a suggestion, that defensiveness may indicate a blind spot. If you feel misunderstood when someone describes your behavior, that feeling may point to something you are not fully aware of. Blind spots are not flaws. They are simply areas where your self-perception does not fully match how others perceive you. Becoming aware of them strengthens your ability to work with a wide range of personalities. Triggers and blind spots often interact. A trigger may cause you to react strongly, and your blind spot may prevent you from seeing how your reaction affects others. For example, if you are triggered by someone who speaks loudly, you may respond with a tone that feels cold or dismissive. You may not notice this shift, but the other person does. This creates a cycle where both people feel misunderstood. When you understand both your triggers and your blind spots, You break this cycle. You gain the ability to respond in a way that reduces tension instead of escalating it. Understanding your triggers also helps you set boundaries. When you know what affects you, you can communicate your needs clearly. For example, if interruptions trigger frustration, you can say, "I need a moment to finish my thought before we continue." If vague instructions trigger confusion, you can ask for clarification without feeling embarrassed. Boundaries are not demands. They are tools that help you work more effectively. When you communicate them calmly and consistently, they reduce misunderstandings and create a more stable working environment. Recognizing your blind spots helps you build stronger relationships. When you understand how others experience you, you can adjust your behavior in ways that make collaboration smoother. This does not mean changing your personality. It means being aware of how your actions affect the people around you. Small adjustments can make a significant difference. A slight change in tone, a brief explanation of your intentions, or a moment of acknowledgement can prevent unnecessary conflict. Identifying your triggers and blind spots is not about assigning blame. It is about understanding the internal patterns that shape your reactions. When you understand these patterns, you gain control over them. You become less reactive, more intentional, and more capable of navigating difficult interactions. This awareness is the foundation for working with people you don't like. It allows you to stay grounded, maintain your professionalism, and approach each situation with clarity. The goal is not to eliminate your triggers or erase your blind spots. The goal is to understand them well enough that they no longer control your behavior. When you achieve this, you create space for better communication, healthier boundaries, and more effective collaboration. You become someone who can work with a wide range of personalities, not because the people around you changed, but because you learned how to navigate the interaction with awareness and strength. Chapter 3: The Art of Staying Calm Around Difficult People. Staying calm around people you find difficult is one of the most important skills you can develop in the workplace. Calmness allows you to think clearly, communicate effectively, and maintain control over your decisions. Yet calmness is often the first thing people lose when they feel irritated, disrespected, or overwhelmed. This chapter focuses on understanding what disrupts your calm, how to maintain composure during tense interactions, and how to build the internal stability needed to work with challenging personalities. Calmness is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to manage your emotional response so it does not dictate your behavior. When someone says something that frustrates you, your body reacts before your mind has time to process the situation. Your heart rate may increase, your breathing may change, or your muscles may tense. These physical reactions are natural, but they can influence your thoughts and actions if you are not aware of them. The first step in staying calm is recognizing these signals as early as possible. When you notice them, you can pause, breathe, and give yourself a moment to regain control. Another important aspect of staying calm is understanding the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate and emotional. Responding is intentional and thoughtful. When you react, you allow the situation to control you. When you respond, you control how you engage with the situation. This distinction may seem small, but it has a significant impact on your interactions. A reaction can escalate tension, while a response can reduce it. The more you practice pausing before you speak, the easier it becomes to choose a response that aligns with your goals. Calmness also depends on how you interpret the behavior of others. When someone speaks in a tone you dislike or uses words that feel dismissive, it is easy to assume they are being disrespectful. But interpretation is not the same as reality. People communicate differently based on their personality, stress level, and habits. What feels rude to you may feel normal to them. What feels aggressive to you may feel efficient to them. When you separate your interpretation from the actual behavior, you reduce the emotional intensity of the moment. This does not mean excusing poor behavior. It means giving yourself the space to understand the situation more clearly. Another factor that influences calmness is your internal narrative. The story you tell yourself about a situation shapes your emotional response. If you think, "They always do this to annoy me," your frustration increases. If you think, "This is just how they communicate," your frustration decreases. Changing your internal narrative does not change the other person's behavior, but it changes how much power that behavior has over you. When you shift your perspective, you create emotional distance that allows you to stay grounded. Staying calm also requires managing your expectations. Many people become frustrated because they expect others to behave in a certain way. They expect coworkers to communicate clearly, respect boundaries, follow procedures, or show consideration. When these expectations are not met, frustration builds. Adjusting your expectations does not mean lowering your standards. It means recognizing that people have different habits, priorities, and levels of awareness. When you expect variation instead of perfection, you reduce the emotional impact of difficult interactions. Another strategy for staying calm is focusing on what you can control. You cannot control someone else's tone, attitude, or behavior. You can only control your response. When you shift your attention from what the other person is doing to what you can do, you regain a sense of stability. This shift reduces frustration and increases confidence. It also prevents you from wasting energy on things that are outside your influence. Calmness is also supported by preparation. When you know you will interact with someone who challenges your patience, prepare yourself mentally. Remind yourself of your goals for the conversation. Decide how you want to respond if the interaction becomes tense. Visualize yourself staying composed. Preparation reduces the likelihood of being caught off guard, which makes it easier to maintain your calm. Another important element of staying calm is creating emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries protect your internal state from being influenced by external behavior. When you have strong emotional boundaries, you can listen to someone without absorbing their frustration. You can observe their behavior without taking it personally. You can stay present without becoming overwhelmed. Emotional boundaries are not walls. They are filters that allow you to engage with others while protecting your well-being. Calmness also requires self-awareness. When you understand your own patterns, you can anticipate situations that may challenge your composure. For example, if you know you become irritated when someone interrupts you, you can prepare a calm response. If you know you become tense when someone raises their voice, you can focus on your breathing. Self-awareness allows you to manage your reactions instead of being controlled by them. Another helpful strategy is slowing down your pace. When you speak quickly or think rapidly, your emotions can intensify. Slowing down your speech, your breathing, and your movements helps regulate your nervous system. This creates a sense of stability that supports calmness. Even a brief pause can make a significant difference in how you feel and how you respond. Staying calm also involves recognizing when you need space. If an interaction becomes too intense, it is acceptable to step away. You can say, "Let me think about this and get back to you." Taking a moment to reset prevents escalation and allows you to return to the conversation with a clearer mind. Space is not avoidance. It is a tool for maintaining control. The art of staying calm is not about suppressing your emotions. It is about managing them in a way that supports your goals. When you stay calm, you communicate more effectively, make better decisions, and maintain your professionalism. Calmness is a skill that improves with practice. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Staying calm around difficult people does not mean tolerating harmful behavior. It means approaching interactions with clarity, intention, and emotional stability. When you master this skill, you gain the ability to navigate challenging situations without losing your sense of balance. You become someone who can work with a wide range of personalities, not because the environment is easy, but because you have developed the internal strength to stay steady. This chapter builds on the foundation established earlier in how to work with people you don't like. In the introduction, you learned that the goal is not to change other people but to strengthen your ability to work effectively in challenging environments. In Chapter 1, You explored the reasons why people clash at work and how differences in personality, communication, and expectations create tension. This chapter expands on those ideas by focusing on your internal response and how calmness allows you to navigate conflict with clarity. As you move into the next chapter, you will learn how to communicate effectively during tense interactions. Calmness gives you the foundation. Communication gives you the tools. Together, they allow you to work with people you don't like without losing your sense of control. Chapter 4: Communication Strategies for Tense Interactions. Communication becomes more challenging when tension enters a conversation. In calm situations, people listen more openly, speak more clearly, and interpret messages with fewer assumptions. But when emotions rise, communication becomes less stable. Words are filtered through frustration, tone becomes more noticeable, and even simple statements can be misunderstood. This chapter focuses on how to communicate effectively when the interaction feels strained, uncomfortable, or emotionally charged. The goal is not to win an argument or change someone's personality. The goal is to maintain clarity, stability, and professionalism while navigating difficult conversations. The first principle of communicating during tense interactions is clarity. When people feel stressed or irritated, they often speak in ways that are indirect or overly compressed. They may hint instead of stating their point, or they may rush through their thoughts without giving the other person time to understand. Clarity means expressing your message in a way that is simple, direct, and free of unnecessary complexity. It does not require harshness or bluntness. It requires intention. When you communicate clearly, you reduce the chances of misinterpretation and create a more grounded environment for the conversation. Another important principle is pacing. Tension often speeds up communication. People talk faster, interrupt more easily, and respond before fully processing what was said. This rapid pace increases the emotional intensity of the interaction. Slowing down your speech helps regulate the tone of the conversation. It gives you time to think before responding and gives the other person time to absorb your words. A slower pace also signals confidence and composure, which can help reduce defensiveness on both sides. Listening is another essential component of effective communication. Many people believe they are listening when they are actually preparing their next response. True listening requires you to focus on the other person's words, tone, and perspective without planning your reply in advance. Listening does not mean agreeing. It means gathering information so you can respond thoughtfully. When people feel heard, they often become less reactive, which makes the conversation easier to navigate. Listening also helps you identify the real issue beneath the surface, which is often different from the words being spoken. Tone plays a significant role in tense communication. Even when your words are neutral, your tone can reveal frustration, impatience, or sarcasm. Tone communicates emotion, and emotion influences how your message is received. A calm, steady tone helps keep the conversation grounded. It signals that you are in control of yourself, even if the situation is challenging. When your tone is steady, the other person is more likely to respond in a steady way as well. Tone is not about sounding cheerful or overly positive. It is about maintaining emotional stability. Another strategy is to focus on the issue rather than the person. When tension rises, conversations often shift from discussing a problem to criticizing the individual. This shift escalates conflict quickly. Instead of saying, "You never listen," you can say, "I want to make sure we understand each other clearly." Instead of saying, "You're being difficult," you can say, "This part of the process feels unclear to me." Focusing on the issue keeps the conversation productive and reduces the emotional charge. It also helps prevent the other person from becoming defensive. Asking questions is another effective communication tool. Questions help clarify misunderstandings, reveal assumptions, and slow down the pace of the conversation. They also show that you are trying to understand the situation rather than react to it. Questions like, "Can you walk me through what you meant?" or "What would help us move forward?" Shift the conversation from confrontation to collaboration. Even if the other person is not cooperative, asking questions helps you maintain control of the interaction. Setting boundaries is also part of effective communication. Boundaries are not demands or ultimatums. They are clear statements about what you need in order to communicate effectively. For example, if someone interrupts you repeatedly, you can say, "I want to understand your point, but I need to finish my thought first." If someone raises their voice, you can say, "I want to continue this conversation, but I need us to speak calmly." Boundaries protect the quality of the interaction and help prevent escalation. They also reinforce your sense of control. Neutral language is another helpful strategy. Neutral language reduces emotional intensity and keeps the conversation focused. Instead of saying, "This is wrong," you can say, "This seems different from what I expected." Instead of saying, "You're causing problems," you can say, "This part of the process needs attention." Neutral language does not hide the issue. It simply presents it in a way that is easier to discuss. When you use neutral language, you create space for the other person to respond without feeling attacked. Preparation also plays a role in tense communication. If you know you will be speaking with someone who challenges your patience, prepare your key points in advance. Decide what you want to say, what outcome you want, and what boundaries you need to maintain. Preparation reduces anxiety and helps you stay focused. It also prevents you from being pulled into emotional reactions that derail the conversation. When you prepare, you enter the interaction with a clearer sense of direction. Acknowledging tension can also be helpful. You do not need to pretend the conversation is easy when it is not. You can say, "I know this topic is challenging, but I want us to work through it." Acknowledging tension shows awareness and maturity. It signals that you are not trying to avoid the issue and that you are committed to resolving it. This simple acknowledgement can reduce defensiveness and create a more open environment for communication. It is also important to recognize when a conversation is no longer productive. If emotions rise too high, communication becomes ineffective. In these moments, it is better to pause the conversation than to push through it. You can say, "Let's take a moment and revisit this when we are both clearer." Pausing is not avoidance. It is a strategic decision that prevents escalation and allows both people to return with a calmer mindset. Chapter 5. Setting boundaries without creating conflict. Boundaries are one of the most important tools for working with people you find difficult. They protect your time, your energy, and your emotional stability. They also create structure in situations that feel unpredictable or overwhelming. Many people avoid setting boundaries because they fear conflict, rejection, or misunderstanding. But boundaries, when communicated calmly and consistently, do not create conflict. They prevent it. This chapter focuses on how to set boundaries in a way that is clear, respectful, and effective, even when dealing with challenging personalities. A boundary is not a demand. It is not an attempt to control someone else's behavior. A boundary is a clear statement about what you need in order to work effectively. It defines what is acceptable and what is not. Boundaries are not about changing other people. They are about protecting your ability to function well. When you understand this distinction, boundaries become easier to set because they are no longer tied to the other person's approval or cooperation. The first step in setting boundaries is identifying what you need. Many people feel frustrated without knowing exactly why. They know something feels off, but they cannot pinpoint the source. Boundaries become clearer when you identify the specific behaviors that disrupt your focus, drain your energy, or create unnecessary stress. For example, you may need uninterrupted time to complete tasks. You may need clarity before starting a project. You may need respectful communication. You may need predictable deadlines. When you identify your needs, you gain the clarity required to express them. The next step is expressing your boundary in a calm and neutral way. Boundaries are most effective when they are simple and direct. You do not need long explanations or emotional justification. A boundary can be as straightforward as, "I need a moment to finish this before we continue," or "I can work on this once I have the details," or "I'm available to discuss this at 2 o'clock." These statements are not confrontational. They are clear and grounded. They communicate your needs without attacking the other person. Consistency is essential when setting boundaries. A boundary loses its effectiveness when it is expressed once and then abandoned. People respond to patterns, not isolated statements. When you communicate a boundary consistently, others learn how to interact with you. They understand what you expect and what you will not accept. Consistency also strengthens your confidence. Each time you reinforce a boundary, you build trust in your ability to protect your space. Another important aspect of boundary setting is tone. Even a well-phrased boundary can create tension if delivered with frustration or impatience. A calm, steady tone communicates confidence and reduces defensiveness. Tone is especially important when dealing with people who are reactive or easily offended. A neutral tone helps keep the conversation grounded and prevents escalation. It also signals that your boundary is not personal. It is simply part of how you work best. Boundaries also require follow-through. If someone repeatedly crosses a boundary and you do nothing, the boundary becomes meaningless. Follow-through does not require anger or confrontation. It requires action. For example, if you set a boundary around interruptions and someone continues to interrupt, you can pause the conversation until they stop. If you set a boundary around deadlines and someone gives you last-minute tasks, you can communicate what is realistically possible. Follow-through reinforces the boundary and teaches others how to interact with you. It is also important to recognize that boundaries may create temporary discomfort. People who are used to having unlimited access to your time or attention may resist the change. This resistance does not mean your boundary is wrong. It means the dynamic is shifting. Discomfort is not conflict. It is simply part of the adjustment process. When you stay calm and consistent, the discomfort fades and the new pattern becomes normal. Another helpful strategy is setting proactive boundaries. Instead of waiting for a problem to occur, you can establish expectations early. For example, at the start of a project, you can say, "I work best when we have clear deadlines," or "I prefer to communicate updates by email so nothing gets lost." Proactive boundaries prevent misunderstandings and reduce the likelihood of tension later. They also demonstrate professionalism and clarity. Boundaries are not only external. Internal boundaries are equally important. Internal boundaries protect your emotional space. They help you separate your feelings from the behavior of others. For example, if someone speaks in a harsh tone, an internal boundary reminds you that their tone is a reflection of their stress, not your worth. If someone is disorganized, an internal boundary prevents you from absorbing their chaos. Internal boundaries help you stay grounded even when the environment is challenging. Another internal boundary involves managing your attention. Not every comment, tone, or behavior deserves your emotional energy. Some situations require a response. Others require distance. Internal boundaries help you decide where to invest your attention. They prevent you from reacting to every irritation and allow you to focus on what truly matters. This selective attention reduces stress and increases your sense of control. Boundaries also support collaboration. When people understand your limits, they know how to work with you more effectively. Boundaries create predictability, and predictability reduces tension. They also encourage others to set their own boundaries, which leads to healthier interactions overall. Boundaries are not barriers. They are guidelines that help people work together with clarity and respect. Setting boundaries does not require force. It requires clarity, consistency, and calmness. When you communicate your needs clearly, reinforce them consistently, and maintain a steady tone, boundaries become a natural part of your working relationships. They protect your well-being, reduce unnecessary stress, and create a more stable environment for collaboration. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about taking responsibility for your own space. As you continue developing this skill, you will notice that boundaries make difficult interactions easier to navigate. They give you structure in situations that feel unpredictable. They help you stay grounded when others are reactive. They allow you to work with challenging personalities without sacrificing your peace or productivity. Chapter 6. Managing your emotional energy around draining people. Emotional energy is one of your most valuable resources in the workplace. It determines how clearly you think, how patiently you respond, and how effectively you handle stress. When you work with people who drain your energy, your ability to stay focused and productive becomes compromised. These individuals may not be intentionally difficult. Sometimes they are overwhelmed, disorganized, negative, or simply unaware of how their behavior affects others. Regardless of the reason, the impact on your emotional energy is real. This chapter focuses on how to protect, manage, and replenish your emotional energy when working with people who disrupt your rhythm or drain your focus. The first step in managing emotional energy is recognizing the signs of depletion. Emotional exhaustion does not always appear as dramatic burnout. It often shows up in subtle ways: irritability, difficulty concentrating, impatience, or a sense of heaviness before interacting with certain individuals. You may notice that your motivation drops after a conversation with them, or that you feel mentally scattered after a meeting. These signals are important. They tell you that your emotional energy is being pulled in directions that do not support your goals. Awareness is the foundation of energy management. Another important step is identifying the specific behaviors that drain you. Not all difficult people drain your energy in the same way. Some drain you through constant negativity. Others drain you through disorganization, requiring you to compensate for their lack of structure. Some drain you through emotional volatility, shifting moods quickly and unpredictably. Others drain you through excessive dependence, relying on you for reassurance or direction. When you identify the exact behaviors that affect you, you gain clarity on how to respond. Managing emotional energy also requires setting limits on how much access others have to your attention. Attention is a form of energy. When someone repeatedly pulls your attention away from your priorities, your emotional energy becomes scattered. You can protect your attention by creating small boundaries throughout your day. For example, you can delay responding to non-urgent messages, limit spontaneous conversations, or schedule focused work time. These small adjustments help preserve your emotional energy and prevent unnecessary depletion. Another strategy is emotional detachment. Emotional detachment does not mean being cold or indifferent. It means separating your internal state from the external behavior of others. When someone is negative, you do not absorb their negativity. When someone is chaotic, you do not internalize their chaos. Emotional detachment allows you to stay grounded even when the environment is unstable. It is a skill that becomes stronger with practice. The more you detach from the emotional turbulence of others, the more energy you preserve for your own responsibilities. Reframing is another powerful tool for managing emotional energy. Reframing means shifting the way you interpret a situation so it affects you less intensely. For example, instead of thinking, "They're trying to make my job harder," you can think, "They're overwhelmed and not managing it well." Instead of thinking, "They always bring negativity," you can think, "Their stress is showing up as negativity." Reframing does not excuse poor behavior. It reduces the emotional weight of the situation, allowing you to respond with clarity instead of frustration. Another important aspect of energy management is controlling your exposure. You may not be able to avoid certain individuals entirely, but you can reduce unnecessary interactions. You can keep conversations brief, redirect discussions to the task at hand, or schedule interactions at times when your energy is higher. Controlling your exposure is not avoidance. It is strategic engagement. It ensures that you interact with difficult individuals in ways that protect your emotional stability. Managing emotional energy also involves strengthening your internal resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover quickly from emotional strain. You build resilience by taking care of your physical and mental well-being. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and rest all contribute to your emotional capacity. When your body is depleted, your emotional energy becomes more fragile. When your body is supported, your emotional energy becomes more stable. Resilience is not built in dramatic moments. It is built through consistent habits that support your overall well-being. Another strategy is creating emotional buffers. Emotional buffers are small practices that help you reset between interactions. For example, taking a short walk, practicing slow breathing, or spending a moment in silence can help you release tension before moving on to the next task. These buffers prevent emotional residue from one interaction from spilling into the next. They help you maintain clarity and prevent emotional overload. It is also important to recognize when you are taking on responsibilities that do not belong to you. Some people drain your energy because you are carrying emotional or mental burdens that are not yours to carry. You may be trying to fix their problems, manage their emotions, or compensate for their lack of organization. When you release responsibilities that are not yours, you reclaim emotional energy that was being spent unnecessarily. This shift allows you to focus on what you can control and let go of what you cannot. Another helpful approach is creating emotional priorities. Not every situation deserves the same level of emotional investment. Some tasks require your full attention and emotional presence. Others require minimal engagement. When you prioritize where your emotional energy goes, you prevent yourself from over-investing in situations that do not support your goals. Emotional priorities help you stay focused and prevent unnecessary depletion. Managing emotional energy also involves accepting that some people will always be draining. You cannot change their personality, habits, or emotional patterns, but you can change how much access they have to your internal world. You can interact with them professionally without allowing them to influence your emotional state. Acceptance reduces resistance, and reduced resistance preserves energy. When you stop expecting draining individuals to behave differently, you free yourself from the emotional tension created by unmet expectations. This chapter builds on the principles introduced earlier in how to work with people you don't like. In previous chapters, you explored how calmness supports clarity, how communication shapes tense interactions, and how boundaries protect your space. This chapter expands on those ideas by focusing on your internal energy and how to preserve it when working with people who disrupt your emotional balance. In the next chapter, you will learn how to stay productive and focused even when the environment around you feels chaotic or unpredictable. Energy management strengthens your stability. Productivity strategies strengthen your momentum. Together, they help you maintain control in challenging environments. Chapter 7. Staying productive in chaotic environments. Productivity becomes more challenging when the environment around you is chaotic, unpredictable, or emotionally charged. Even when you are skilled, disciplined, and motivated, external disruptions can interfere with your ability to stay focused. Chaotic environments often include unclear expectations, shifting priorities, disorganized coworkers, constant interruptions, or emotionally reactive individuals. These conditions make it difficult to maintain momentum, complete tasks efficiently, and stay mentally organized. This chapter focuses on how to remain productive even when the environment around you is not ideal. The first principle of staying productive in chaos is controlling your internal pace. Chaos often creates a sense of urgency that is not based on actual deadlines. When people around you are frantic, disorganized, or reactive, their energy can influence your own. You may feel pressured to rush, multitask, or respond immediately to every request. This reactive pace reduces your effectiveness. Controlling your internal pace means slowing down your thinking, organizing your steps, and choosing your actions intentionally. When you control your pace, you prevent the environment from dictating your rhythm. Another important principle is prioritization. In chaotic environments, everything can feel urgent, even when it is not. Without clear priorities, you may spend your time reacting instead of progressing. Prioritization requires identifying the tasks that matter most and focusing on them first. This may include tasks with deadlines, tasks that support long-term goals, or tasks that prevent future problems. When you prioritize effectively, you create structure within the chaos. You give yourself a clear direction, even when the environment lacks clarity. Setting microgoals is another effective strategy. Large tasks can feel overwhelming when the environment is unstable. Breaking tasks into smaller, manageable steps helps you maintain momentum. Microgoals create a sense of progress and reduce the mental load associated with complex tasks. They also help you stay focused when interruptions occur. If you are pulled away from your work, you can return to the next microgoal without losing your place. This structure keeps you productive even when the day is fragmented. Another strategy is managing your attention. Attention is one of your most limited resources. In chaotic environments, attention is constantly pulled in different directions. You may be interrupted by conversations, messages, noise, or shifting demands. Managing your attention means choosing where to focus and protecting that focus as much as possible. This may involve working in short, concentrated intervals, reducing distractions, or creating physical or mental boundaries around your work time. When you manage your attention intentionally, you maintain control over your productivity. Creating predictable routines is also helpful. Chaos disrupts routines, but routines can also stabilize chaos. A routine does not need to be rigid. It simply needs to provide structure. For example, you can start your day by reviewing your priorities, checking your schedule, and identifying your top tasks. You can end your day by organizing your workspace, summarizing what you completed, and preparing for the next day. These routines create a sense of order that supports productivity, even when the environment is unpredictable. Another important strategy is reducing cognitive clutter. Cognitive clutter occurs when your mind is filled with unfinished tasks, unresolved concerns, or competing priorities. This clutter reduces your ability to think clearly and make decisions. Reducing cognitive clutter involves writing things down, organizing your tasks, and creating systems that help you track your responsibilities. When your mind is clear, you can focus more effectively and respond to challenges with greater stability. Protecting your mental space is also essential. Chaotic environments often include emotional noise, complaints, negativity, tension, or conflict. This emotional noise can drain your energy and disrupt your focus. Protecting your mental space means creating emotional boundaries. You do not absorb the stress of others. You do not internalize their urgency. You do not take responsibility for their disorganization. When you protect your mental space, you maintain clarity and prevent emotional overload. Another strategy is simplifying your workflow. Complex systems break down easily in chaotic environments. Simple systems are more resilient. Simplifying your workflow may involve reducing unnecessary steps, organizing your tools, or creating templates for recurring tasks. When your workflow is simple, you can stay productive even when the environment is unstable. Simplicity reduces the cognitive load required to complete tasks and increases your ability to adapt. It is also important to manage interruptions strategically. Interruptions are inevitable in chaotic environments, but they do not need to control your day. You can manage interruptions by setting boundaries around your availability, scheduling focused work time, or redirecting conversations to more appropriate moments. You can also use brief pauses after interruptions to reset your focus before returning to your task. Managing interruptions helps you maintain momentum and prevents your day from being consumed by reactive tasks. Another helpful approach is adjusting your expectations. Chaotic environments rarely allow for perfect productivity. If you expect perfection, you will feel frustrated and overwhelmed. Adjusting your expectations does not mean lowering your standards. It means recognizing the reality of your environment and adapting accordingly. When you accept that some days will be fragmented or unpredictable, you reduce the emotional tension associated with unmet expectations. This acceptance helps you stay grounded and productive. Staying productive in chaos also requires emotional regulation. When the environment is unstable, your emotions may become more reactive. You may feel irritated, anxious, or overwhelmed. Emotional regulation helps you stay steady. This may involve pausing before responding, practicing slow breathing, or stepping away briefly to reset. Emotional regulation prevents the environment from influencing your internal state. When you stay emotionally steady, your productivity remains stable. Another important strategy is focusing on what you can control. Chaotic environments often include factors outside your influence. You cannot control other people's behavior, decisions, or emotions. You cannot control organizational changes or shifting priorities. But you can control your actions, your focus, your pace, and your response. When you focus on what you can control, you reduce frustration and increase your effectiveness. This shift in focus helps you stay productive even when the environment is unpredictable. Finally, staying productive in chaos requires resilience. Resilience is the ability to adapt, recover, and continue moving forward despite challenges. You build resilience through consistent habits, emotional awareness, and intentional decision-making. Resilience does not eliminate chaos. It helps you navigate it with clarity and confidence. When you develop resilience, you become someone who can remain productive even in difficult environments. Chapter 8. Maintaining professionalism when you're reaching your limit. Professionalism is often tested most intensely when you are dealing with people who challenge your patience, disrupt your focus, or create unnecessary tension. It is easy to remain professional when the environment is calm and interactions are smooth. The real test comes when you feel drained, frustrated, or overwhelmed. Maintaining professionalism in these moments is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It is about choosing behaviors that protect your integrity, your reputation, and your long-term goals. This chapter focuses on how to stay professional even when you are reaching your limit. The first principle of maintaining professionalism is self-awareness. You cannot manage what you do not recognize. When you feel your patience thinning, your tone shifting, or your thoughts becoming reactive, that awareness gives you the opportunity to pause before responding. Self-awareness is not about judging yourself. It is about noticing your internal state so you can choose your next action intentionally. When you recognize early signs of frustration, you prevent small irritations from escalating into unprofessional behavior. Another important principle is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation does not mean ignoring your feelings. It means managing them in a way that supports your goals. When you regulate your emotions, you create space between what you feel and how you respond. This space allows you to choose clarity over impulse. Emotional regulation can be as simple as taking a slow breath before speaking, pausing before replying to a message, or stepping away briefly to reset. These small actions help you maintain control even when the situation feels overwhelming. Professionalism also requires separating the person from the behavior. When someone is difficult, it is easy to personalize their actions. You may interpret their tone as disrespect, their disorganization as carelessness, or their negativity as hostility. But personalizing their behavior increases emotional intensity and reduces your ability to respond professionally. When you separate the person from the behavior, you focus on the issue rather than the emotion. This shift helps you stay grounded and prevents unnecessary conflict. Another strategy is using neutral language. Neutral language reduces emotional charge and keeps the conversation focused on facts. Instead of saying, "You're making this difficult," you can say, "This part of the process needs clarification." Instead of saying, "You're not listening," you can say, "I want to make sure we are aligned." Neutral language does not hide the issue. It presents it in a way that is easier to discuss. When you use neutral language, you maintain professionalism even in tense interactions. Setting boundaries is also essential for maintaining professionalism. When you are reaching your limit, Boundaries protect your emotional space and prevent reactive behavior. Boundaries can be simple and direct. For example, you can say, "I can continue this conversation once we have the details," or "I need a moment to finish this before we move on." Boundaries are not confrontational. They are tools that help you stay composed. When you set boundaries consistently, you reduce the likelihood of reaching a breaking point. Another important strategy is focusing on your role rather than the behavior of others. You cannot control how others act, but you can control how you respond. When you focus on your responsibilities, your standards, and your goals, you maintain professionalism even when others do not. This focus helps you stay aligned with your values and prevents you from being pulled into reactive patterns. Your professionalism becomes a reflection of your character, not the environment. Managing expectations is another key component. Difficult people often behave in predictable ways. When you expect them to act differently, you create frustration for yourself. Adjusting your expectations does not mean accepting poor behavior. It means recognizing patterns so you can prepare mentally. When you expect a disorganized person to be disorganized, you are less emotionally affected by their behavior. When you expect a negative person to be negative, you are less likely to absorb their mood. Adjusted expectations reduce emotional strain and help you stay professional. Another strategy is controlling your exposure. When someone consistently drains your energy or disrupts your focus, reducing unnecessary interactions helps protect your professionalism. You may not be able to avoid them entirely, but you can limit the frequency and duration of interactions. You can keep conversations brief, redirect discussions to the task at hand, or schedule interactions at times when your energy is higher. Controlling your exposure is not avoidance. It is strategic engagement that protects your stability. Professionalism also requires clarity. When expectations, responsibilities, or instructions are unclear, frustration increases. Seeking clarity early prevents misunderstandings that can lead to tension. You can ask simple questions such as, "What is the priority here?" or "When do you need this completed?" Clarity reduces confusion and helps you stay focused. It also prevents unnecessary emotional reactions caused by uncertainty. Another important strategy is documenting important interactions. Documentation protects you when situations become complicated or when misunderstandings arise. It also helps you stay organized and reduces cognitive load. Documentation is not about creating conflict. It is about maintaining accuracy and accountability. When you document clearly, you reduce the emotional intensity of interactions because you rely on facts rather than memory. Maintaining professionalism also involves knowing when to pause. When emotions rise too high, communication becomes ineffective. Continuing the conversation in that state increases the risk of unprofessional behavior. Pausing is not avoidance. It is a strategic decision that protects your composure. You can say, "Let's revisit this once we are both clearer." Pausing allows you to reset and return with a calmer mindset. Another strategy is focusing on long-term consequences rather than short-term emotions. In the moment, reacting may feel satisfying, but unprofessional behavior can damage your reputation, relationships, and opportunities. When you focus on long-term outcomes, you choose actions that support your goals rather than your impulses. This perspective helps you stay composed even when you feel overwhelmed. Finally, maintaining professionalism requires self-care. When you are exhausted, stressed, or overwhelmed, your emotional capacity decreases. Self-care strengthens your resilience and increases your ability to stay composed. This may include rest, movement, healthy routines, or moments of quiet. Self-care is not indulgence. It is maintenance. When you take care of yourself, you protect your ability to remain professional even in difficult environments. Working with people you don't like is not a rare situation. It is a normal part of professional life. Every workplace includes personalities that clash, habits that frustrate, and behaviors that test your patience. The goal is not to eliminate these challenges. The goal is to navigate them with clarity, stability, and professionalism. Throughout this book, you have explored practical strategies that help you stay grounded even when the environment is difficult. These strategies are not theoretical. They are tools you can apply in real conversations, real meetings, and real moments of tension. A consistent theme across every chapter is control, specifically, the control you have over your own behavior, your own energy, and your own boundaries. You cannot change how others think or act. You cannot force someone to communicate clearly, stay organized, or manage their emotions. But you can decide how you respond. You can decide how much access others have to your attention. You can decide how you protect your time, your focus, and your emotional stability. This sense of control is what allows you to stay effective even when the environment is unpredictable. Another theme is clarity. Clarity in communication, clarity in expectations, and clarity in boundaries all reduce unnecessary tension. When you communicate clearly, you prevent misunderstandings. When you set boundaries clearly, you protect your space. When you clarify expectations early, you reduce frustration later. Clarity is not about being forceful. It is about being intentional. It is a skill that strengthens your confidence and improves your interactions with others. You have also learned the importance of emotional regulation. Difficult people often trigger emotional reactions, frustration, irritation, impatience, or fatigue. These reactions are normal, but they do not have to dictate your behavior. Emotional regulation gives you the ability to pause, reset, and respond with composure. It helps you maintain professionalism even when you are reaching your limit. It also protects your long-term reputation, which is shaped more by how you behave under pressure than by how you behave when things are easy. Finally, this book emphasizes the value of internal stability. External environments will always shift. People will always have different personalities, habits, and communication styles. Some will support your work. Others will complicate it. But your internal stability, your ability to stay calm, focused, and intentional, remains within your control. When you strengthen this stability, you become someone who can work effectively with anyone, even those you do not naturally connect with.